AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling's partnership has revitalized and energized wrestling as a whole, as there hasn't been a partnership between two genuine juggernauts in wrestling for the longest time. Through the birth of the Forbidden Door, AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling have shook the wrestling world and made wrestling genuinely exciting again. So much so that WWE even tried to get in on the fun. Remember that time when WWE tried to be New Japan's exclusive North American partner after they saw that they were working with AEW?
Oh, no.
Yeah, that didn't work out so well. But seriously, the concept of the Forbidden Door, meaning wrestling companies collaborating and working with other wrestling companies, isn't new. It's been around since the territory days. But for this video, we're going to look at the Forbidden Door in the context of major North American wrestling promotions, mainly AEW, and Japan's biggest wrestling promotion, New Japan Pro Wrestling. The WWE, known as WWF back in the days, worked with New Japan since the 1970s, with WWF wrestlers traveling to Japan for New Japan shows and Japanese wrestlers traveling to the USA for WWF shows. The founder of New Japan Pro Wrestling, Antonio Inoki, even won the WWF World Heavyweight Championship in 1979, but unfortunately this result was reversed a few days later by WWF, so Antonio Inoki's short title reign is not officially recognized by WWE. New Japan and WWF's partnership was so strong in fact that Hulk Hogan was even the inaugural IWGP Heavyweight Champion. Weird, right? Their partnership continued throughout the years, and it all culminated in 1990 in the first joint show ever with New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWF, and All Japan Pro Wrestling. This event was held in Japan and drew 53,000 people, thus showing how lucrative the Forbidden Door concept was. However, while it was a massive success for all three companies, New Japan and WWF never ever worked together again, with WWE focusing on trying to increase their market share in the USA, primarily against their biggest rival, WCW. Funnily enough, once WWF and New Japan's partnership ended, New Japan partnered with WCW. This partnership saw them collaborate by sending wrestlers back and forth between the USA and Japan. They also collaborated on a few different super shows in Japan that drew massive crowds of over 60,000 plus in the Tokyo Dome. But most notably of all, WCW and New Japan Pro Wrestling held the Collision in Korea, which is wrestling's highest capacity show of all time, drawing 355,000 fans in 2 nights, 165,000 people on day 1 and 190,000 people on day 2. This was groundbreaking. Even though admission to these events was free, it showed the genuine appeal of the Forbidden Door concept. After this event in 1995, WCW focused more on their war against WWE in the USA, but was still using some wrestlers from Japan from time to time. WCW were eventually bought out by Vince McMahon and WWE in 2001, thus ending New Japan's relationship with major American promotions. Since then, New Japan Pro Wrestling looked at alternatives to WWE in the USA. Throughout the years, New Japan Pro Wrestling partnered with TNA, ROH, and other smaller promotions in the USA. While this was cool to see, it did not reach the same heights and was not of the same magnitude of their partnership with WWE and WCW in the 20th century. However, in New Japan's partnership with Ring of Honor, magic was brewing. There was a time where wrestling was in a very bad state in the USA, but the Bullet Club, consisting of Kenny Omega, Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, Hangman Adam Page, and more, managed to put New Japan Pro Wrestling and ROH on the map as they provided an alternative for disgruntled WWE fans, which led to massive growth for New Japan Pro Wrestling. Kenny Omega especially grew into a superstar. His matches against the Rainmaker Kazuchika Okada shot him to the top of New Japan Pro Wrestling and wowed fans all over the world. Kenny Omega and the Elite were garnering a great amount of traction in the USA. This led them to use talent from New Japan Pro Wrestling and Ring of Honor to hold the biggest independent wrestling show ever, All In, which drew 10,000 plus fans and caused billionaire Tony Khan to offer the Elite an opportunity to change the wrestling scene in the USA by creating a new promotion that will rival WWE. The Elite had a decision to make: stay in New Japan Pro Wrestling and Ring of Honor and build up those companies further, or permanently relocate to the USA in order to truly change the wrestling world. The Elite chose the latter, and they formed All Elite Wrestling, AEW. The Elite basically said this to New Japan:
fuck this shit, I'm out.
This did not go well with New Japan Pro Wrestling though. Most notably, their president at the time, Harold Meij, who felt hard done by with the way that the Elite left New Japan, which was also understandable from an executive perspective. New Japan Pro Wrestling made those guys into stars, and they were the top guys of the company, making them a lot of money, and then they just left in a mass exodus. Despite New Japan's harsh feelings towards the Elite and AEW wanted to work with New Japan, so AEW officials tried to set up meetings with Harold Meij and the New Japan board in order to work out a working relationship between the promotions. These meetings were however shut down by Harold Meij because he wanted to meet directly with Tony Khan, but this was not possible because Tony Khan was not available. Tony offered to send AEW representative Chris Harrington and the Young Bucks to talk in place of him, but Meij declined. Meij also felt that the Elite, barring Kenny Omega, were expendable, and he also felt that AEW would not do well, seeing that there were a group of wrestlers running a promotion that did not have a proven track record. AEW and New Japan were not on good terms, and a partnership was clearly not going to come to fruition, so they both pressed on without an official working relationship. However, wrestlers signed to AEW were still appearing on New Japan Pro Wrestling. This is because AEW contracts allow their wrestlers to work anywhere else besides other major wrestling promotions in the USA. Jon Moxley and Chris Jericho took advantage of this by appearing in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and they were both integral parts of the Forbidden Door being opened. In late 2019 and early 2020, Le Champion Chris Jericho was the AEW World Champion, and he was involved in a feud against the ace Hiroshi Tanahashi in New Japan Pro Wrestling. The two men were set to face each other at Wrestle Kingdom 14, New Japan's biggest show in the year, and in the build-up to this match, Hiroshi Tanahashi said that if he was able to beat Chris Jericho in their non-title match at Wrestle Kingdom, then he's going to step through the Forbidden Door and challenge Chris Jericho for the AEW World Championship on AEW TV on American soil. New Japan even started mentioning AEW on their show, even though AEW didn't acknowledge the storyline as canon in their universe. This still set the wrestling world ablaze at the prospect of AEW and New Japan working together. Their match at Wrestle Kingdom rolled around, and Chris Jericho wore the AEW World Championship over his waist, and this added even more hype into the match. Unfortunately, Chris Jericho picked up the win, meaning that Tanahashi would not be able to challenge for the AEW World Championship in America. While this was upsetting to see, the seeds of the Forbidden Door was sown. Through all of this, a lot of hype was created, but New Japan and AEW was still not on the greatest of terms. Nonetheless, it was pretty evident a collaboration would have an immense pull to the fans. Something very important also happened at Wrestle Kingdom 14. Jon Moxley won the IWGP US Heavyweight Championship. Early into Jon Moxley's reign as the IWGP US Heavyweight Champion, the pandemic hit, and this prevented Jon Moxley from traveling to Japan to defend the title. New Japan also had a show in the USA called New Japan Strong, but Moxley's contract with AEW said that he was not allowed to wrestle in the USA for a major wrestling promotion, so he could not perform on New Japan Strong. Usually, the right thing to do in a situation like this is to strip him of the title, but New Japan didn't do this. Instead, they chose to wait, and Jon Moxley ended up not defending the IWGP US Heavyweight Championship for a whole year. Over in Japan, things were not going so well for Harold Meij. Executives in New Japan and wrestlers were upset with Meij's management of the company. Meij also got a lot of backstage heat because of how he handled the situation with AEW. As a result of this, New Japan executives held a vote of no confidence in Meij. He was relieved of his duties. He was replaced by Takumi Obari, who was the new president of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Obari had a new vision for the company, and that vision had AEW inside of it. Obari realized that there was no point in holding the IWGP US Heavyweight Championship hostage with Jon Moxley in America, so he decided to open New Japan up for talks with AEW. Obari had a key role in smoothing things over with AEW because he was willing to talk to AEW about a potential working relationship, and soon enough the two men came to an agreement, but this was not known to the public. Wrestlers had always teased the Forbidden Door, but with the pandemic so rampant, fans didn't see AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling working together anytime soon. But little did they know, a whole storm was brewing. New Japan then announced a match between Kenta and Jon Moxley for the IWGP US Heavyweight Championship on New Japan Strong. This sent the wrestling world into a frenzy because it was one of the first clues that there was an agreement in place between AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling to work together. This time round, both companies were promoting this match, so fans could tell something was definitely going on. Then on an episode of Dynamite, in a post-match angle after the main event, Jon Moxley was about to attack Kenny Omega, and then a masked figure attacked Jon Moxley and unveiled himself. And surprise, surprise, it was Kenta from New Japan Pro Wrestling. And this was absolutely shocking. Kenta showing up in AEW was a wrestling moment that left you like this.
What the hell?
When AEW first started, Jon Moxley promised a paradigm shift. AEW had already shifted the paradigm, but with the confirmation of the AEW and New Japan partnership through Kenta appearing in AEW, the paradigm shifted even further, as now 2 of the 3 biggest promotions on planet Earth were working together. Fans online went crazy over the sight of Kenta in AEW. It was one of those times where the wrestling internet was in a proper meltdown. Kenta debuting in AEW was amazing, but people were more excited for what Kenta showing up in AEW represented. The monumental birth of the true Forbidden Door. AEW had already been working with other promotions in the USA like Impact and NWA, and they were uniting wrestling once again by being the instigator to having a wrestling economy reminiscent of the territory days in the 70s and 80s, and New Japan was the newest and most important addition. The wrestling world was changing right under the fans' eyes, and this just confirmed AEW as the hottest promotion in wrestling at that point. Since the pandemic started, AEW had no crowd, so it was really hard to cultivate an air of unpredictability. But with the introduction of the Forbidden Door, it felt like anything could happen at any time in AEW. AEW fans were genuinely excited about what was to come next, and wrestling outside of WWE was alive and well. WWE saw how much hype and buzz the Forbidden Door was creating in the wrestling world, and they decided to try and steal this hype by opening negotiations with New Japan to become their exclusive American partner. In response to this, Tony Khan went to his badass mode and cut a promo on Nick Khan and WWE for not achieving anything with their talks. Tony Khan was basically smoking that WWE pack. WWE did not achieve anything in their attempt to hijack the Forbidden Door, but they did however draw influence from the Forbidden Door. This was seen by them having Mickie James, the Impact Knockouts champion, enter in the Royal Rumble, and most recently by having Chris Jericho, Bryan Danielson, and The Big Show of AEW on WWE Raw to celebrate John Cena's 20 years in the wrestling business. Triple H even said that they were willing to work with other promotions as long as it's beneficial to WWE. The Forbidden Door influenced WWE to change their stance on working with other companies, and that's how powerful and frightening the relationship between New Japan and AEW was to WWE. AEW Dynamite was can't miss TV, as anyone from New Japan could show up at any time. The Forbidden Door was only one way to America because Japan had very strict borders. Still, the Forbidden Door was open, and wrestlers like the legend Blue Justice Yuji Nagata showed up to challenge Jon Moxley for the IWGP US Heavyweight Championship, and this was the first time a New Japan belt was defended on AEW TV. Jon Moxley picked up the win in this match. Ren Narita and Rocky Romero were then next to show up in AEW. Then at AEW's All Out 2021, New Japan legend and Bread Club's very own Satoshi Kojima walked through the Forbidden Door for a match against Jon Moxley for the IWGP US Heavyweight Championship. Moxley beat Kojima and retained, but after this, the King Minoru Suzuki walked through the Forbidden Door to a huge ovation. The crowd were hot for him, and they showed this by shouting out along to his famous entrance song, Kaze ni Nare. This was such an awesome moment, and fans were excited to see the match between Jon Moxley and Minoru Suzuki, which was set for the following week. But right before this match took place, something happened that shook the wrestling world. As Minoru Suzuki was walking down to the ring to his classic entrance music, the AEW production team cut off his music before the Kaze ni Nare. This was absolutely heartbreaking and was one of the most shameful and dark days in wrestling. Cody Rhodes even had this to say on the Suzuki Incident. That was the moment when I knew I had to leave AEW. The Suzuki Incident was just too much to handle. No, but seriously though, the Suzuki Incident morphed into a life of its own and was absolutely hilarious. Jon Moxley picked up the win in this match and retained against Suzuki, but then later lost the IWGP US Heavyweight Championship to Lance Archer in a Texas Death Match. From here on out, other wrestlers from New Japan Pro Wrestling walked through the Forbidden Door and showed up in AEW, like Tomohiro Ishii, Hikuleo, David Finlay, Yuya Uemura, pardon my pronunciation, and the Switchblade himself, Jay White. While this was awesome to see, fans wanted to see more out of the Forbidden Door. The fans wanted to see the likes of Kazuchika Okada, Will Ospreay, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Tetsuya Naito, Gorillas of Destiny, and more appear in AEW. Fans had created many dream scenarios and dream matches that they wanted to see, but most of all, the fans wanted to see Kenny Omega face off against Kota Ibushi one more time. If you don't know the story of the Golden Lovers, then after this video, you should watch my video on the Golden Lovers. It seems like the Forbidden Door was made exclusively for Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi, because they have such a tumultuous and complex story that is begging to be concluded. And what better way to conclude it than through the Forbidden Door? Even though fans were clamoring for all of these big names to show up in AEW, they knew it was only a matter of time before AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling do a super show. There was simply too much interest and hype in the Forbidden Door. And then in late April of 2022, all the wrestling fans' wishes came true. Tony Khan and Takami Obari announced that AEW and New Japan would be having a joint show called Forbidden Door on June 26, 2022. This sent the wrestling fans into overdrive, as they were fantasy booking the card left, right, and center, pinning their favorite New Japan wrestlers against their favorite AEW wrestlers in epic, dazzling matchups that would have any wrestling fan salivating at the mouth. A lot of fans' dreams came true, as many wrestlers debuted in AEW, like the Ace Hiroshi Tanahashi in a segment against CM Punk, the Commonwealth Kingpin Will Ospreay and the rest of the United Empire debuting in segments against Orange Cassidy and the Best Friends, and one of the best technical wrestlers in the world today, Zack Sabre Jr. debuting in a segment with Bryan Danielson. And after it was rumored that he wasn't going to be on the Forbidden Door show, the Rainmaker Kazuchika Okada debuted to a massive pop. Okada debuted in a segment with Adam Cole, Hangman Adam Page, and Switchblade Jay White. Okada was now in America for the first time in 3 years, and he hadn't seen the Young Bucks in a minute, so he proceeded to steal the Young Bucks gear in typical Okada fashion one more time. Never change, Kazu. While these were awesome moments, the build-up to Forbidden Door was plagued with many unavoidable issues, mainly injury. One was to do with Kenny Omega, who had not been in AEW for over 6 months because of injury, and it was confirmed that he was not going to be able to make it to the Forbidden Door pay-per-view. Similarly, Kota Ibushi was also battling injury, and was also involved in a spat with New Japan that left him on the shelf indefinitely. The biggest dream match that fans wanted to see on Forbidden Door was not going to happen. CM Punk also injured his leg freshly after he won the AEW World Championship, and this required him to have surgery, so he was also off Forbidden Door. Bryan Danielson suffered a concussion, so he was also off Forbidden Door. Andrade El Idolo was supposed to wrestle Will Ospreay at Forbidden Door, but was stopped because of politics between AAA, CMLL, and New Japan Pro Wrestling. The Lucha Bros suffered the same fate, as they were also not allowed on the show because of these politics. And much more stars were injured in AEW and could not compete on the show even if they wanted to. On the New Japan side of things, Tomohiro Ishii was announced to be on the card, but had to pull out of the card due to injury to his knee. Time Bomb Hiromu Takahashi was also scheduled to be on the card, but had to pull out a few days before the show because he had a fever, which also led to Hikuleo of the Bullet Club being pulled from the show. A lot of favorites like Gorillas of Destiny and Tetsuya Naito were also not booked on the show. Stardom Talent was also supposed to be on the show, but they could not get their visas in time. On top of all of these injuries and unfortunate events, fans were also complaining that despite the massive debuts, the pay-per-view had a very underwhelming and weak build. They also said that there were way too many multi-man matches on the card. This was proving to be the most cursed card in AEW history. A lot of fans expressed their lack of faith in the card, and they thought the pay-per-view wouldn't do very well. AEW was kind of like, we're gonna throw a great show, and the fans were like,
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
But one thing you've got to love about AEW is that you can never bet against them. Forbidden Door was an absolute home run of a pay-per-view, and is going to be remembered for years to come. This pay-per-view was seriously exceptional, and that is an understatement. All the way from Eddie Kingston and Minoru Suzuki facing off, and Moxley's protege Shota Umino stealing the show in the first match, to FTR becoming the new IWGP World Heavyweight Tag Team Champions, as well as holding the ROH and AAA World Tag Team Championships, to the Bastard Pac deservedly winning his first championship in AEW, the All-Atlantic Championship, to watching the 63-year-old icon Sting jump off the AEW stage set and onto the Young Bucks, to wrestling royalty Katsuyori Shibata coming out to a gargantuan pop and squaring off against Orange Cassidy in an entertaining exchange, to Thunder Rosa and Toni Storm proving their worth and having a very solid match, to the wrestling genius Will Ospreay and Orange Cassidy having arguably the best match of the night, lost. To seeing the Swiss cyborg Claudio Castagnoli debuting in AEW and winning his match as a replacement for Bryan Danielson, to watching Jon Moxley winning the AEW Interim World Championship in an excellent buddy match against Hiroshi Tanahashi, to the fatal 4-way barn burner of a match for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship between Kazuchika Okada, Switchblade Jay White, Hangman Adam Page, and Adam Cole that had the crowd popping hard from the moment the bell rang. Unfortunately, the only dull spot on this pay-per-view happened in this match, as the finish was not good, but it was later revealed that Adam Cole suffered a concussion during the match that caused Jay White to improvise the awkward pin. Despite this, AEW and New Japan's Forbidden Door was a pay-per-view for the ages. It was the type of pay-per-view that gave you a wrestling boner.
Pardon my lewdness, I got a boner for that.
It's a strong contender for pay-per-view of the year. It's even rated as the second best pay-per-view that AEW's ever held, behind AEW's All Out 2021 with a rating of 9.24 out of 10. Forbidden Door also sold 127,000 pay-per-view buys, which is very impressive. What makes all of this all the more impressive is that Forbidden Door was dogged with injuries and uncertainties, but somehow AEW and New Japan managed to make gold out of potatoes. The Forbidden Door has pumped a much needed breath of fresh air into the wrestling business as a whole, and is a reminder of how genuinely exciting, unpredictable, captivating, and special wrestling can be. Tony Khan also said that there is going to be a Forbidden Door 2, so just imagine how much better the pay-per-view will be when New Japan and AEW are at their full strength. And with Japan's borders opening up, it wouldn't be a surprise to see AEW talent in New Japan Pro Wrestling once again. It's going to be insane, so get strapped in for the ride. AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling have brought good old professional wrestling back home. Thank you for watching the video. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. But anyway, goodbye, you jobbers.